What happens when a nation that once welcomed American industry decides to slam the door shut? For Boeing, this is no longer hypothetical. Beijing's recent announcement, all Boeing 737 MAX deliveries and critical component production in China are suspended, effective August 2025. This move grounds a significant portion of Boeing's future production and escalates the US-China trade dispute into a direct assault on a flagship American corporation. The fallout was immediate. Boeing's stock plummeted, billions in market value vanished, and production lines in Seattle and Charleston face unprecedented bottlenecks. China cited safety concerns after recent software glitches, but the timing, just after new US tech restrictions, makes the message clear. For decades, Boeing's strategy relied on China, projecting over 20% of global deliveries to the country and sourcing key components from Chinese suppliers. Now, that integration is Boeing's greatest vulnerability. The Halt exposes the risks of relying on a single foreign market, especially a strategic rival. Finding and certifying new suppliers for critical parts will take years, not months. This is more than a temporary disruption. It's a fundamental reordering of the aerospace landscape. Boeing, and the entire US manufacturing sector, must now confront a new reality. Market access can be weaponized with devastating precision. The world is watching as this high-stakes confrontation unfolds. The question is no longer if, but how, Boeing and American industry will adapt. The era of business as usual is over. Boeing and China's relationship began over 50 years ago after Nixon's 1972 visit with China's first order of Boeing jets. As China's economy boomed, Boeing became its dominant aircraft supplier, integrating China into its global supply chain. Partnerships with Chinese state-owned enterprises led to key aircraft components being produced in China, deepening interdependence. By 2023, China was Boeing's largest single-country market, with projections of $1.5 trillion in aircraft demand by 2042. Boeing even opened a 737 completion center in Zhoushan, cementing its long-term commitment. But beneath the cooperation, China was building its own aerospace ambitions, establishing COMAC and developing the C-919 jet. What began as partnership shifted to mentorship for a future competitor. The recent Halt is the culmination. China, once the student, now challenges the master. Boeing's deep integration, once a strength, is now a liability. The story of Boeing and China is a warning about the risks of sharing technology with a strategic rival. The partnership that fueled decades of growth has become a battleground. The lesson: today's collaborator can become tomorrow's competitor. The future of global aviation is now up for grabs. Boeing's crisis is the latest escalation in a years-long US-China trade and tech war. It began in 2018 with sweeping US tariffs on Chinese goods, answered by Beijing's own tariffs on American products. The conflict quickly expanded to technology, with the US restricting Chinese firms like Huawei and targeting China's chip industry. Beijing saw these moves as existential threats, prompting increasingly sophisticated retaliation. China's latest move, targeting Boeing, marks a shift from broad tariffs to precise high-impact strikes. This isn't just about trade, it's about technological supremacy and global influence. Boeing, America's largest exporter and a symbol of industrial power, is now a central pawn. By halting deliveries and component production, China demonstrates it can inflict direct pain on key US industries. Washington faces a dilemma: escalate and risk more retaliation, or seek de-escalation and compromise on strategic goals. The stakes are enormous, with the global economy and the future of US-China relations hanging in the balance. The Boeing crisis is a warning. Economic interdependence is now a battlefield. The next moves will shape the world's industrial and geopolitical order. The chessboard is set, and Boeing is at the center. Boeing's global supply chain, once a model of efficiency, is now fractured. Chinese partners produce essential 737 MAX components: vertical stabilizers, tail sections, fuselage panels. With production halted, Boeing's assembly lines in Washington will soon grind to a halt. The expertise and certifications for these parts are unique to Chinese facilities. Replacing them is a years-long process. Meanwhile, dozens of completed jets for Chinese airlines are stranded in the US, billions in frozen assets. Boeing's delivery numbers to China have dropped to zero, creating a massive inventory and revenue crisis. Nearly every 737 MAX contains large, critical assemblies from China. This is not a minor dependency. The fracture is deep, threatening the integrity of Boeing's entire production system. The data is clear. What was once a strength is now a critical weakness. The supply chain break is not a crack, it's a chasm. The impact ripples far beyond Boeing's headquarters. Boeing relies on 12,000 US suppliers, many small businesses now facing reduced orders and financial distress. In regions like Washington and South Carolina, layoffs threaten entire communities. The crisis exposes the vulnerability of American manufacturing's global dependencies. Other industries, auto, electronics, pharma, face similar risks. The Boeing shock may force a painful reckoning efficiency versus security. The true cost of globalization is now on display. Official statements from Washington and Beijing reveal a deepening divide. The White House condemned China's move as economic coercion, calling safety concerns a pretext for retaliation. US officials insist Boeing meets all international safety standards and accuse Beijing of violating global trade norms. Bipartisan support for Boeing is strong. Some lawmakers demand immediate retaliation, others urge diplomatic engagement. The crisis is seen as a watershed moment, demanding a unified US response. Beijing, meanwhile, frames the halt as a necessary safety measure, citing recent software issues and regulatory requirements. Chinese officials avoid direct mention of US tech sanctions, but insist all companies must follow Chinese law. The official line maintains regulatory legitimacy while sending a clear political signal. Both sides are entrenched. Washington sees economic warfare, Beijing claims regulatory necessity. The standoff leaves little room for compromise. Domestic pressure in the US demands a forceful response. China is determined to show it can withstand US pressure. The war of words sets a confrontational tone. The world is watching. Will this harden into a prolonged industrial Cold War? The stakes have never been higher. With Boeing sidelined, Airbus stands to gain. Chinese airlines needing new planes are turning to Airbus, which already has a strong industrial presence in China. Airbus's Tianjin assembly line gives it a local advantage and the capacity to ramp up production. Reports show Chinese carriers negotiating for hundreds of new Airbus jets. This could permanently shift the global market, relegating Boeing to second place. The US-China standoff may hand Europe a massive windfall, complicating US strategy. The duopoly that defined aviation is at risk of a dramatic realignment. For Boeing, the consequences could be lasting. Boeing's crisis is a warning to all US industries with deep ties to China. Any company with significant market share or supply chain operations in China is now vulnerable. Sectors like automotive and tech, think GM, Ford, Apple, face similar risks if China applies the Boeing model. The precedent forces every boardroom to ask, what if our access to China is suddenly cut off? The era of treating China as just an economic partner is over. The focus is shifting from efficiency to resilience and security. Companies must urgently map and mitigate supply chain dependencies. The global economy may fragment into rival blocs. The warning shot at Boeing was heard across America. Adapt or risk being the next target. Boeing's crisis marks a turning point for US industrial policy. The immediate response: financial support for suppliers, WTO disputes, and high-stakes diplomacy with Beijing. Boeing must reconfigure its supply chain and find new customers for stranded jets. Two paths emerge: escalate with retaliatory measures, risking economic war, or strategically adjust by reshoring and diversifying supply chains. The first path punishes China but risks global recession. The second requires massive investment and long-term commitment. The Boeing crisis exposes the vulnerabilities of economic engagement with a strategic rival. America faces a crossroads: security or efficiency, confrontation or adaptation. The choices made now will shape the future of US industry for generations. The crisis is about more than one company. It's about the price of security in a connected world. Is America willing to pay it?